Ah, the Raspberry Pi. Probably one of the best known tinkering computers for projects of many shapes and sizes. I recently talked a bit about what is needed to play full PC Minecraft on one of these computers, including some performance tweaks. And since the 110 milestone in Patreon was reached, thank you very much for that, I have also gone and bought a Raspberry Pi 3. I have been wondering what is the first experiment I want to try on this. Continuing with my fascination with overclocking weird things, I wondered, can this device be overclocked? And how is the process? If you have no idea what overclocking is, well, every CPU on the hearth of every computer is running on a clock, an electrical signal that determines how often the CPU executes an instruction. The faster the signal, the more instructions the CPU goes through and the faster the computer is. Those are very general terms, by the way. Clock speed is not the only thing that determines how fast a CPU is, but it can be a good indicator. Now, overclocking is increasing the frequency of the signal being fed to a component to try and get it to work faster. A question many people seem to have at this point is, right, so if a chip is capable of being faster, why isn't the clock already at a higher frequency? The answer can be a bit complicated. A chip is designed for a specific frequency for many reasons. Often it cannot handle the increased heat that a higher clock will generate, which is often why you see people in overclocking competitions using some ridiculous methods to keep the components cool. Sometimes, when the component is manufactured, each part is built with a tolerance that can only guarantee working at a certain speed, and anything over it could or could not work. Which is why sometimes you could buy the same product twice and discover that one of them will fail at a higher frequency than the other. Also, this is why you often void a product's guarantee when you overclock. And that takes us right back to the Raspberry Pi. This model uses the BCM2837 quad-core ARM CPU clocked at 1.2 GHz. Like many ARM chips, the CPU can operate with no extra cooling, but since we're planning to try and make it go higher, it might be a good idea to add something to help with the heat, like this tiny heatsink. You can get a set of Raspberry Pi heatsinks on many stores that usually sell the components themselves. This set has 3 heatsinks. The bigger one is meant for the CPU/GPU, the second one is meant for the memory, which can also be overclocked, and the third one is for the Ethernet chip? I'm going to focus on the CPU/GPU here, so I will apply just that. Heatsinks like this work by conducting heat from the chip to the metal, and then the fins maximize the surface area that is in contact with the air, and therefore dissipating the heat. Simple and effective. To measure, I'm going to use Quake 3 Arena. This is a 1999 game running on the 3rd generation of the IDTech engine. The Raspberry Pi uses an ARM architecture and not the x86 architecture a regular PC has, so you won't see me playing CSGO on this device, but luckily for us, Quake 3 has been open sourced and ported to ARM architecture, and can be installed through a lengthy process that is better suited for a separate video because I do not want to get out of topic. Let me know if a more detailed overview of installing and tweaking Quake 3, maybe on a weaker Raspberry Pi, is something that you would like to see. The good thing about this game is that with just a couple of console commands I can get a very quick benchmark, where the Raspberry Pi 3 got about 76 FPS. I also tested with GLGears, a small utility used to test OpenGL performance, and after picking up speed on the first 5 seconds, the test averaged between 170 and 180 FPS. Alright, time to get to work. Overclocking this open computer is surprisingly easy. There's a configuration file that controls many of the starting variables located on boot config.txt. I'm going to focus on 2 variables. ARM_FREC controls the speed of the CPU in megahertz. The default speed of the CPU is 1200 for the Raspberry Pi 3, and here is where it gets tricky. The maximum speed you might be able to reach on your specific chip depends a lot on luck. I have seen reports of people being able to reach 1.35 GHz at times with the appropriate cooling, so I tried getting to 1.3, which works for a little bit, but even with reasonable temperatures it will crash at some point. So I was forced to reduce it to a meager 1.25, where it stayed without much issue. The chip also has its own integrated GPU, which can also be overclocked. You can control the GPU's clock with the core_FREC variable. The default speed for the Raspberry Pi 2 is 400 MHz, but I was successful on changing it to 500. I experimented with 550, which initially seemed to work, but the terminal would randomly stop working, and at some point the application bar stopped doing things, which forced me to unplug. And 600 just straight up screwed up the booting screen. This is not how it's supposed to look. But with those small changes, Quake 3 jumped 279, which is small but still measurable. The OpenGL benchmark after the first 5 seconds is now always over 180, and sometimes as high as 190. So, you can squeeze a bit of extra performance out of a device like this with just some changes to a file. As long as you have how to manage the heat and you don't care about the guarantee, I would recommend you experiment with this yourself. Maybe you will get some extra stability out of other games running on Raspberry Pis. Thank you to the Patreon donors, as usual, for your involvement. New videos are being uploaded soon.